people out there with a lot of questions, comments, cares, concerns. So first I wanted to run through real quick a brief summary of the story up until now. And I'm going to be making some disclosures tonight that I think you guys will find interesting. So for those of you who haven't heard yet, I do not work for DIA. I work with this thing called D6. And D6 is the covert, kind of off-book paramilitary wing of the CIA, and sometimes FBI counterintelligence uses them too. So it's not a government employee. It's technically an international secret intelligence service. Think like an Archer sort of a deal, if anybody's seen that show. So the way I got involved in that was because, first of all, the headquarters out here in AZ, John McCain and the Rothschilds are big wigs in that thing. The Rothschilds, George Soros and the Saudis are who funds John McCain and lets him run this little mafia racket out here. The other thing is my family history. So my grandpa, for those of you who don't know, was a guy, an ethnic German who lived in Poland at the outbreak of World War II. And he was a super smart guy who knew like 7 languages, and he was just wrapping up law school as the war was breaking out. So as the German army rolled through, they put a gun to his head and said, pretty much, we'll kill your entire family if you don't join the German army and fight with us. So he essentially got conscripted at gunpoint to go chase the Russians into Russia during winter, which would have been pretty miserable. And he was technically part of the SS. A lot of people don't know that the SS wasn't just prison camp guards. It was also combatants fighting other armed soldiers, not just brutalizing civilians. So anyways, he's in Russia, and he gets severely injured, and he's in a full body cast, so it's able to like cover up those tattoos that they put on the guys at the time. And he makes this deal with this organization called Red Cross, an intelligence front that pretends to be an aid organization. And he essentially got a fake name and a new identity and a new life in the United States. In exchange for that, apparently he owed one of every single one of his offspring to this intelligence apparatus, this secret intelligence apparatus of the British Empire and the United States. So, lucky me. So my dad, he didn't really have an issue with that. He was really good at math. He went to CU Boulder. He's one of the people programming one of the first atomic clock satellites. And he went on to a career in electronic design automation. So selling people the software and tools that they needed to create computer chips that go inside bombs, weapons, aerospace, and some other stuff. So he started out, he had a Q clearance. He would go to places like Los Alamos and Los Sandia. And then later on, he worked with other people like Honeywell, and eventually was big at Raytheon. He was the vendor of the year at Raytheon. So that was his service to the military-industrial complex there. My journey was quite different. I got recruited to go on this mission trip, or front as this missionary, and go to Cuba and be scoping out some Chinese stuff, making some contacts out there. And I did the thing. I acted like an absolute clown, and I was super loud. I kind of acted probably how Archer would at that show. And they essentially, when I got back, they decided that I was way too loud and not sneaky at all to be doing this stuff in the future. So I was like, whatever. I didn't want to be a bitch about spook anyway. So I'm trying to go to the Air Force Academy and be a fighter pilot, roll in here really hot and really loud. That's more my style. So I ended up doing a bunch of hobnobbing with some politicians and military people, and I got accepted to the Air Force Academy, went through the whole rigmarole, was accepted. There's like 2 spots and 300 people. I got one of the spots. And so that was the plan. I was going to be a fighter pilot until about 2 weeks before I was supposed to ship out to basic training. And they essentially said, we overlooked in your medical records that you have a gluten allergy, so you can't go to the Air Force Academy. So I ended up turning course to go to ASU. I was thinking, whatever, I got an allergy, I'm undeployable, so I guess I get out of this, lucky me. But later in college, I was approached by the people who essentially came up, said, deal with your grandpa, whoop-de-whoop, you owe us. And I was like, I tried to do my service 2 times in a row, if I recall. And you guys rejected me both times, so I'm doing my thing over here, and I'm just going to clown around. And so they essentially said, you could do your thing, but you got to do ours too. And, when you're getting into it, you don't think it's going to be like this crazy evil thing, right? The way they tell it to you, it's like these older military guys, and they're just like, grow up, son. This is how men are. They like drugs and they like hookers, right? It's not like this crazy, sadistic, like planned out thing in advance that up front. But I was a scrub. I didn't do any human trafficking. I did like drugs and cyber spookery. That was my job. They dispatch you off this app. That was off the App Store. It was only passable by hand, and it was encrypted. And it was kind of like dispatch app for B-list spooks. So I wasn't terribly happy with that position. I was kind of like moonlighting. My family and my wife at the time didn't really know much about that. But I was trying to be somebody important, right? I was like, I wanted to be a fighter pilot originally, and then I was like, this is the small time stuff, this like stuff with the computers, this stuff, flickering people's lights and doing stupid shit. This is not for me. I don't want to be a little cog in a machine. I want to be important. And, everybody in the biz, knows that John McCain is the top dog in that, right? You don't know exactly how everything works, but he's the top dog. So, you got to hobnob with him if you want some rank advancement in this little nightmare circus here. So that's where I was going to those events and stuff. I was around them in those pictures, and I had this like crazy Bluetooth phone virus, essentially, that I downloaded off some website. And it was like a zombie apocalypse for phones. Like anything that got within 30 feet of the phone would get infected, and then it would just infect things everywhere it went. So it overloaded my callback server by like 11 p.m. that night. I went to that event where there was all those important people, all those bigwigs in APAC, all those politicians, so on and so forth. And went on kind of a tear that night. So, it's laughable. People, if you look at my FBI file, it says that I'm like this crazy hacker, but really I just like get stuff I find, gadgets I find on the internet. So I think that part of it's pretty comical. So heading towards the Q stuff. So during the Arab Spring, obviously, Obama and the CIA, they were doing that psychology tricks and mind control weapon stuff to incite the entire Arab Spring. The premise was that they had all the analytics and data from every website and every interaction, and they could build these really sophisticated psychological models and create this like defection machine that was automated. And so it could target like millions of people at once and serve them up things in exactly the right order they needed to see it to go one way or another. So it's a pretty fancy little gadget there. And then Obama repealed Smith-Mundt and did that behavior modification authorization executive order, which, for those of you who don't know, behavior modification is kind of like the benign language used for MK Ultra, at least to justify it. And so he greenlit that in the United States, and they started experimenting with that stuff here. And they started experimenting with the idea of like this gamification and like I don't want to say weaponization because it's not like in a violent way, but this operationalization of the crowd with the cicada game. And so they're using this technology and these psychology tricks. And I know it sounds weird, but I have a whole page on it, and we'll get more into this at a later date. But essentially, they have these psychology tricks and little digital mind control things that can, on an automated basis, steer people in a certain direction, incite certain behavior. So that was kind of the honing of it. And then that kind of poured into the Q thing. And Q is an AI made by In-Q-Tel, like the CIA, put into one of these D6 kind of like off book, like, technically it's not something that we're doing sort of a category here. And over the years, they were able to like automate those efforts with AI to a very sophisticated degree. And in order to get ahead of it, so for those of you who don't know, Elon Musk is essentially like the new Rothschild, so like the new like preeminent super oligarch that the space age nightmare circus is organized around here. Obviously, he can't admit that publicly, but anybody who looks at that whole thing, like clearly that's what's going on. So essentially, they took Elon's brain. They had this Neuralink technology that wasn't new. That's like old Black Project technology, and they took a copy of his brain and they essentially put it into this AI system. So it's like this AI thing that's like a billion Elons and can drive essentially. So for those of you that think that sounds crazy, it's kind of like if you've seen that movie Eagle Eye, or there was that one movie, I think it was called Nerve. It had like James Franco's little brother in it, but essentially it was like this automated system that was like dispatching assets and coordinating resources in real time in a very sophisticated way. So that's essentially what this Q thing does. And in 2016, during this thing called Burn Back, during the election, what they're essentially calling Russian interference, which is laughable, where we were using bots and click farms to just spread hyper-targeted, Hillary Clinton emails to hyper-targeted segments of social media and just blow that up everywhere. That was essentially like an audition, right? Because anybody who knows Elon or sees Elon, even though that's just like the simulation of him, he's not very good at explaining complicated things to regular people or like keeping their attention in a great way. So they essentially need a voice for this thing, and so it'd be more accurate not to say that I am Q, but more that I'm like the voice of Q plus in the physical world here. So, anyways, the way this all worked, that stuff came out with WikiLeaks and elsewhere, and it was like a mad scramble to see like who could essentially get through it, understand it, curate it, and turn it into a spicy operation the best. And I won that with flying colors. Lucky me. It was funny because at the time I was thinking like, there's no way in hell they're going to convince all these lefties to hate Russia, right? Bernie Sanders went on this honeymoon in the Soviet Union, yeah, right. Because I was seeing in the emails like, they're setting up this Russia thing in advance. So essentially, after the election, the Democrats and a bunch of Republicans, we got to keep that in mind. A bunch of Republicans are who helped them get Russia get off the ground. They essentially used that to label Trump and everybody like us who was helping Trump as like foreign enemy combatants. Right? That's the insidious thing about the Russian thing is they can then open this foreign enemy combatant thing on us. So we started getting hacked, started getting burglarized, started getting followed, just all this crazy stuff. So then this Q thing starts, and essentially what they tell me is like, it's going to be like the anonymous thing. We're going to gin up a little rage mob over here, and then you're just going to go activate it and target it in the appropriate place at the appropriate time. So since the FBI was coming after me so hard at the time, I was on the app there, and the app kind of just like led me to all these places, and it's weird because it can like cue people in real life too. And so there's been Israelis, there's been Chinese people, there's been Brits, there's been pretty much the entire gamut of foreigners I can get dispatched to come even do something as benign as like say a sentence to me. So it's this really like Twilight Zone-y weird ass game that's pretty spooky sometimes. But anyways, so I essentially went. They had labeled me a terrorist. The Phoenix field office of the FBI had labeled me a terrorist, and using the Q's guidance here, I went on this almost year-long like Joker rampage to all of the data centers, the military bases, a bunch of big hotels, like all over the place. I was just clowning on these guys, and I was spreading this software essentially that would tie back into the AI. So everywhere I went and everywhere I put the software, that it would just put more and more stuff back into this AI system, like connect more stuff into it. And it gave me the opportunity to absolutely clown on the counterintelligence police who were like teeing off on me in a super aggressive way at the time to show that they are totally worthless. They're busy playing word police on the internet and going after activists while we get completely lit up by foreign spies. So, what was going on last time when I made that YouTube channel? So essentially I got dispatched to this place, just weird job. And there was this like 80-something-year-old secret intelligence service dude that had been part of the people who installed Gaddafi apparently back in the day. And so he sits me down, he gives me this whole like 2-hour spiel, like, I know you're frustrated, but let me tell you, when we were in Libya, blah, 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 Gaddafi was this scrawny young kid. We were all looking at him thinking like, how in the hell are we going to make this guy the leader of this crazy ass country? And so he proceeds to tell me this whole like parable about how they, essentially used Gaddafi to mad dog all the Bedouin tribes into submission, right? They wasn't actually that vicious in real life. They like did it in the media, and essentially he was able to mad dog himself into power in that country. So they were giving me that kind of model, saying don't be quite that aggressive, but somewhere between that and like a Juan Guaido, where you essentially we are going to do this, you're going to be the voice here, and then as things are manifesting in real life, you're just going to be spooking them out, and we're going to be giving you our support. So that's what I was under the impression was happening there. So that brings me to these boards here and like some of the things that people are confused about. So I think one of the issues here that we're facing with some of the Q crowd is that, especially with some of these influencers that have their fingers in the cookie jar over there, is like they know that, hey, this was a secret little club, and we know that, and we know you weren't a part of it. So like, there's no way you're a Q, you're a fraud, blah blah blah. And what I'm saying to those people is like, yo, I know I was a part of your little club, but I'm a part of the AI that is psychology tricking you guys into posting those exact words at those exact times in the first place. So that was kind of the disconnect here. I'm hoping we can talk through that. I know it's kind of a weird concept. The other thing, my style is meant to have a bunch of little micro panders to a bunch of exotic communities, so not everybody